Okay, so for today's episode, we have with us Abby Smith, who is with the Maine Racewalkers. And you people who are familiar with Abby back when she was competing seriously may remember that she was the 2012 high school indoor mile champion and also was the 2010 Bruce MacDonald High School Athlete of the Year when she won the 5,000 meters at the Penn Relays and finished second at nationals in the 10,000. Welcome, Abby. How are you doing today?
Good, thanks.
Glad to have you with us here. So we just wanted to go over a little bit about what you're doing in Maine and the progress that is being made there with the athletes that you're working with. And if you can tell us a little bit about that, I'll start us off with you just give us a little bit of background more than what I gave about your history as a race walker, how you started and where it led you.
Yeah, so I started when I was, I think, 10 or 11. My younger brother had a lot of interest in starting track, and it really wasn't something I wanted to do. And then kind of halfway through the summer when meets had started and he got into it, my parents were like, you're here, you're supporting him, you might as well just hop on the track and try something. I wasn't really super into running. I tried everything because it was a youth program where you kind of had to try everything and rotate through. And race walk was really the only thing that I took a major liking to. I was not super great at it at first at all, but I stuck with it because it wasn't running and I liked it. And kind of, I think by the time I hit 13 or 14, I ended up being one of the fastest kids in the state in the summer. And I was invited by the coach of my program and my best friend's dad to start training with the athletes that he trained year round. So by my freshman year, I was training from November to August. I did pretty much everything on the indoor circuit. I did Nike Indoor Nationals at the time, and then I think it was like National Scholastic Indoor, Penn Relays, the Milrose Games, Junior Nationals, Outdoor Nationals. So we kind of just did them all, everything from the mile all the way up to the 10,000. And it was a really great experience. I think I ended up making 6 US junior teams, with the biggest one being going to Saransk, Russia in 2012 for the World Race Walking Cup, which was a really cool experience. The other teams that I made were the US Canada duels. And then I got a scholarship to race walk in college. So I went to Goshen College in Indiana, and I was a 6-time All-American there. I ended up coaching the year after I graduated. I was their race walk coach for 1 year. And then we moved back to Maine, and I started working with a high school in the town that I lived in that had a history of having some pretty decent race walkers. And then it really wasn't until this summer that the youth coaching got really big. I had always coached since the time I aged out of the program that I started in. So in my small town, I've coached the race walkers there since I was 15. But this year is the year that it really started to kind of get larger and branch out.
Nice. And for the people who aren't familiar with Maine and the high schools there, which school is that? Which town is that?
I live in Auburn. So
Okay.
The Auburn Youth Program is the program that I've worked with for over a decade.
Yeah, and they've had a pretty significant history of having a good youth development program all year.
Yeah.
Even going through into the summer, they do a pretty good job up there.
Yeah.
So when you were starting out, which one of the Toms was your biggest connection?
When I started, the coach for our youth team was Tom Menendez for our just Auburn summer rec track. And then as I got older, we also met Tom Eastler, and a lot of the athletes that he worked with would go to a lot of the indoor races with us that were kind of more local to New England, like at Harvard and MIT, that USATF New England would put on. And then some of those athletes would also come with us to, especially like the mile nationals in March and in June. And then my brother, when he came through and hit high school, he did a lot of working with Tom Easler for his high school training.
Great. Yeah. And both the Toms, spent many years, including really decades, building that program out in Maine.
Yes.
And now it looks like it's you. You look like you're in charge at this point. Tell us a little bit about how you've, kind of, taken the reins in Maine, and a little bit about how you sort of have combined that on an international level by being involved with Rob Heffernan, the great Irish walker.
Yeah. So when I was coaching the youth program as a high school athlete, we really had built up a lot of momentum in our summer track program. It started in June, it ended in August. I remember my senior year, like 2 days before I left for college, we sent, I think, 25 race walkers just from our team alone had qualified to go to state, something crazy like that. And they ended up scoring, just race walkers alone, 125 points just for our town.
That's almost enough to win the meet.
Right. We tied the most competitive team in the state because we scored 125 points in the race walks.
Nice.
And then I left 2 days later and I went off to college, and it was a lot harder for me to come back in the summers and do as much as I had done. And I know my brother kind of stepped in and helped a lot with those kids when I was gone and not in the state. But I've kind of always wanted to come back to it. It was like my favorite part of every summer. So it's something I've been wanting to do for a while. And I've also noticed there are just kind of less high schoolers, especially, kind of accessing the opportunities that are out there for them beyond just the Maine mile. So I did coach at Mount Blue in 2018, which is a high school about an hour from where I live now when I lived up there. And we had a lot of really awesome success there. And then when we moved back to Auburn, I started getting more involved again with the summer program. And then last spring, I would say, I started working with the high schoolers at Edward Little, which is the high school in our town, again with my brother. And then I started trying to just kind of find and make connections with some of the other teams in the area. So I ended up helping athletes from 2 or 3 different high schools this spring, just for their high school spring mile season. And then when that was over, I kind of really said, okay, guys, like, doesn't have to be over. We have, we had high school outdoor nationals and we had junior Olympics. And so I ended up honestly just kind of pouring through the results from the class A, B, and C state high school meets and reaching out to either individual athletes or the coaches of those teams and just kind of saying, hey, like, I'm here. This is what I'm doing with some kids that I've already been working with. If you could reach out to your athletes and see if it's something that they're interested in doing, maybe training for Junior Olympics at the end of July. And I ended up with 7 high schoolers, middle school and high schoolers, that decided they wanted to try to make the jump from the mile at the end of June to a 3K by the end of July.
And how did that go for them? How did that big jump from, because that 3K can be really intimidating, right, for them.
I think it went as well as could be expected. Honestly, the kids who committed right away, I think, had 7 weeks to train. And then there were a couple more that decided a little bit later, so they had a lot less time. So they kind of just knew, like, this is for fun. It's going to be an experience. It's the first time I'm trying it. So we're just going to go see what this is like. We were able to get them one 3,000 race in Maine that, like, we just threw together, got sanctioned last minute, brought out officials. It was just them. We only did a race walk. That was it. Just so that they could say they had attempted it in a race-like setting before getting down to Jacksonville. And it was really, really fun to have kids who had competed against each other as competitors all spring training together multiple days a week, kind of becoming teammates. I'm really excited to see how that pans out this spring, now that they're coming in kind of as teammates, even though they compete for different high schools. I think that's something that I really appreciated when I was competing in high school. I was friends with so many of the other race walk athletes from the other teams because of what we did outside of the high school's mile season.
Mhm.
So they did really great. So Lucian Beardsley and Rowan McDonald both went to the outdoor nationals in Oregon last summer. They got fourth and fifth. They reversed. They had got first and second at the state meet, and then they got fourth and fifth at that meet. Rowan got first in the 13-14 age category at Junior Olympics. Lucian got fifth in the 17-18 boys race, I believe. We had Ashlyn Poulin get third in the 17-18 girls race. And then we had Izzy Langelier, Casey Smith, and Kiki Dinsmore all in that super competitive 15-16 girls race at Junior Olympics. So for their first shot at a big race or second shot at a big 3K race, I was really impressed, especially with the heat and the lack of time that they really spent specifically training for that distance.
Yeah, and I know that as we're doing this, USATF is doing their annual meeting. It started yesterday, and they have released the youth honor roll. And I don't recall off the top of my head, and I'll put it in at the end. I believe a couple of your athletes have been honored, but I don't know off the top of my head which ones. But I believe Lucian is one of them. But I don't want to say definitely. I'll put it in at the end of the video, and I'll talk about it, after we've concluded. But so you sort of have done the grassroots thing. You're building the program back up to what the traditional Maine reputation is for producing walkers, and then Rob Heffernan, to kind of go back to that, he started something during the pandemic where he was been trying to get youth walkers going, and he originally was just trying to keep it in the UK, and then it kind of went worldwide, and you were just all over that. I mean, there wasn't a day or a week that went by where there wasn't a video or a picture of your athletes getting posted. And I know that he was really excited about it, and so was Pierce. And they kept reaching out to you, like, send us more. So tell me about the experience that the kids had there.
Yeah, so that ended up kind of being a totally different group of kiddos than the ones that I just talked about going to Junior Olympics. But I saw that you had shared it on one of the Facebook pages that we're both on. And I just kind of had clicked on it because I thought it was super cool, because I had met Kate Veal when I went to Russia, and we had spent a lot of time actually that weekend. I think we spent the most time with the Irish juniors out of anybody else. So when I saw there was Ireland, I got really excited, and I reached out to Pierce and just said, hey, like, would you accept anybody from the United States? I have, maybe just at the time I was thinking of 2 9-10-year-old boys that I had that are really gung-ho about race walk, and then a couple 13-14-year-old girls that I knew might hop in and do it if they knew it was happening. And he was super excited and said sure, and told me I needed to download WhatsApp so I could keep in touch with what all the challenges were every week. And we started the first week. I had 4 kids, and it was snowing here. It was January, and we just like measured out a course on a plowed parking lot, and they did their whatever 1K or 2K distance, and they hadn't done any training, but it was just, let's do it for fun. Let's keep using our race walk muscles over the winter. And then it really just grew. I had a couple more kids join that were younger from a couple different area youth track teams that knew that I knew what was going on with race walk. And then I ended up teaching. I'm a teacher and I teach 5th grade at an area elementary school. And somehow my students found out what I had been doing because I coached one of my colleagues' daughters, and she was doing the challenge. And they were all like, well, wait, Mrs. Smith, what's a race walk? What? And they had heard me talk about it, but they didn't really know what it was. And it turned into this whole thing where I ended up teaching the entire 5th grade at my school at recess how to race walk. and, showing them pictures from my trip to Russia and like the video of me winning New Balance Indoor Nationals my senior year of high school. And it became like this huge thing. And I ended up having like 12 kids, I think, who were like, I want to do this. So we measured this little 200-meter course on the tar part of our parking of our playground. And they all got permission from their parents to do the challenges from Rob. So I had like 2 at school groups doing the challenge during the week on our playground. And then I had a weekend group of kids that I knew from places outside of my school coming to do their challenge. So like my life last winter was just like recording times and counting laps and keeping track of all of these kids and what distance they were supposed to be doing, and then making sure that Pierce had them by the right time in Ireland every Sunday. But it was really, really cool. I think one week the highest we had from Maine was 25 kids from Maine doing the challenge. And we were the largest group in the entire Rob Heffernan Race Walk Academy.
That's
We had
impressive.
we had the most kids in the whole world doing it at that time. And we never ended up getting on a call with Rob Heffernan, but Pierce put together a Zoom call and he pulled some kids that were from his training group, and Jane Seville's kids over in Spain. And we got on a Zoom call and we introduced the kids. I introduced all of mine and Pierce introduced all of his and kind of just gave a background for all of them. We ended up on Zoom with them for almost 2 hours, and only the first 30 minutes was talking about race walk. And after that, it was just like, what do we call things in Ireland? What do we call them in the United States? What does school look like there? What's the weather? And the kids just made all of these super amazing connections with each other. I know some of the older kids were getting on Snapchat and following each other on TikTok, and I think some of them still keep in touch.
That's
I know
awesome.
I had some younger kids who were doing more like supervised pen pal emailing. Um, it was really cool. It was a
It'll
really
be,
great
yeah,
experience.
that's awesome. I mean, those kind of connections are what keep the kids involved, but also get them past the stigmas that, I mean, you've seen it pretty much your whole life, the stigmas that comes from coaches and from other athletes, and the way that walkers are treated as sort of, the stepchildren of the sport, sometimes. And that's a good way of putting it. I mean, sometimes it's even worse than that. But just, getting rid of that stigma and letting these kids feel a sense of community is really, really cool. And, it's important, and it's great that you were able to do that. So where do you see the main program going now that, track is basically back, and there's almost like, what you were used to before all of the pandemic, it's almost back to normal. And I've got the same thing here in North Carolina, where things are finally getting back to where they were. And I had a program that I was trying to develop for youth in high school, and I had just sent out all the email contacts, and then literally everything closed the next week. And I was like, oh, that was a waste of time. So now that we're back to normal, where do you see things going?
Yeah, so I think we'll have a better showing this year. I had over 40 U14 athletes training from like 8 different area youth track programs this summer, coming once or twice a week to the track 2 minutes from my house to train together. And I mean, that group got really big by the end of the summer. 29 of the 40 plus kids that were coming qualified to go to our main state meet, and 25 of them got a podium spot, which was over half the podium spots, even though they made up only a third of the athletes that were competing in race walks that day. So I had a lot of momentum there by the end of August. They're little, so I don't know how many of them will really do stuff this winter. Our access to track facilities is not great. So we might have to pull what we pulled during the Rob Heffernan Academy, which was measuring loops in plowed parking lots and making it happen if there are some younger kids that want to do stuff this winter. But I'm hoping that definitely by the end of the spring, I can get all of those kids back and hopefully start pulling from some other groups too, for that younger group to get larger, because I think that's really what's going to fuel the higher numbers in the next couple of years among the high schoolers. Right now with the high school kids, I'm kind of just working with whoever's interested, but I know that those numbers will go up significantly once this
Yeah.
huge group of younger kids starts to hit that age. But right now it's a lot of 9, 10, 11, 12-year-olds that are really excited. So if we can just keep them really excited, that's kind of the key. I have 3 kids who just did their first 5K ever, just kind of for fun, coming off cross country, hadn't done any training for it, just were like, sure, I'll do it. Just finished cross country, did their first 5K race walk down in Connecticut. And I have probably 6 right now who have started training and are looking kind of at hopefully the 2-mile nationals in March. And then there's the USATF Youth Indoor that I'm sure I will have maybe some of the younger kids even want to try that. It'll really depend on COVID and what families are willing to do and what facilities. Right now here, we only have 1, maybe 2 universities that are allowing anything to happen on their tracks. So all of the others are only allowing their own college athletes to use them. So that will definitely be a little bit of a barrier for us, because most of these kids, like Maine doesn't have race walk in indoor track like New York does. It's not an event as part of the indoor high school program. So I have some kids that are doing skiing. I have some kids that are doing swimming. I have some kids that are running for their indoor track team. And some that are just going to do just race walk on their own. And so it's a lot of moving parts for all those kids, depending on what else they have going on this winter. But hopefully we'll be able to get a couple of them to some of the bigger races this winter, and then go back to a much larger group in the spring when it's easier to get everyone together and have a place to train.
Yeah, and you've got all the regularly scheduled high school meets and everything. One thing that I've been hearing, because I've always got my ear to the other side of the equation, which is the colleges, is that particularly on the boys' side, the college coaches are like, where can we find men? I was like, just wait. I said, it's going to be another year or 2, but Maine, watch the kids in Maine. I said, that's where all the boys are. And they had a bit of a dip in participation. They suffered more during COVID than the girls did, because just the numbers are always larger on the girls' side. But watch out for the kids in Maine. They're in the next year or 2, you'll start to see, more and more and more of that. And, then, to recruit heavily up there. And so they're like, okay, thank you. Just tell us who we need to watch for. I'm like, well, you just watch the website. I don't know what else to tell you. It's there.
Yeah, no, I have a couple of juniors and seniors that are definitely looking to put their name on the map this winter and spring by attempting some of the longer distances as well. And a lot of them, they were just kind of doing what they knew how to with their high school coaches. And now they're like, okay, like, I'm going to start training now. I'm going to train all year. By the time they hit the high school season, they'll be blowing their times from last year out of the water, simply because their training approach is entirely different, and they will have been doing it since the end of November. So I'm excited for them.
They don't get they're not training with the mentality of they only need to walk 4 laps and be done. That, they need to train like they're cross country runners and be able to do 5K regularly to walk a fast mile.
Right. It's the whole, like, we know that a lot of our races this winter are going to be the mile, and we know that, in outdoor, they're going to want to be doing the mile, but a lot of them are thinking, okay, well, I want to try a 5K, or I want to be ready for 10K nationals in June. So being able to balance being ready for the speed early, but also starting to build our endurance so that they're ready for that longer stuff.
Great. Well, I mean, it sounds like you're doing an awesome job up there in Maine, and, taking over. And basically it's like the second generation of leadership, and if we follow you back, we go back to all the way back to the beginnings of high school race walking. If you looked at the history of it, you could follow yourself back to the people who started it, because through the Toms, it's a direct line to those people. So, it's just really impressive that you're keeping things going up there in Maine. Is there anything else that, you want to add? Or?
I don't know.
Okay. Well, I really appreciate you coming on. Thanks for giving me some of your time, and enjoy the Maine winter. And I hope to see you at a couple of the big meets.
Yeah, we'll see if I get there. Thanks so much for having me.
All right. Thank you.